Hello there. I'm going to recap from the last video. Basically, I went through the experiment of removing the axes from a cube, and as we remove the z-axis, we realized that a true 2D square cannot have any kind of mass or matter. And when we completely remove a y-axis, a true line cannot have any kind of light. So we've removed all mass and matter, and we've removed all light. And observing the universe and the way time affects us, as a line, we start at the beginning and we end at the end. And there's no deviating from that timeline. And time is invisible, we can't touch it, there's no mass, there's no matter, and we can't see it, there's no light that indicates this is where time starts and this is where time ends, except for what we understand of our universe and its possible or impossible parameters. So, time as a 1D force in the universe. A lot of physicists out there are speculating on time being fourth dimensional, which is kind of understandable. We don't fully understand the fourth dimension. We know that we cannot see it. Now, my examination of 3D shapes tells me this. The lower dimension affects the upper dimension, but not the other way around. So if time were fourth dimensional, and only fourth dimensional, so visible here in the form of a tesseract, or in my theory a toroid, if time were fourth dimensional, it would not have any effect physically on the third dimension. How can I prove this? Well, the cube does not affect the size of a square. The cube is made of 6 squares. The square does not affect the size of a line, but the square is made of 4 lines. I hope that you're with me here. So if you want to make a 2-dimensional circle, we add the ratio of pi to a line, and the line, its length, multiplied by pi equals the circumference of the circle. The line affects the size of the circle. The line affects the upper second dimension. That circle multiplied again by, is it the radius or the diameter twice, and you get a sphere. The 3D sphere is not affecting the size of the circle, it's the circle that affects the size of the sphere. And so it is with the fourth dimension, the first 3 dimensions multiplied by phi cubed. If you're operating with a square, then you will end up with the shape of a tesseract. If you are operating with a circle, you will end up with the shape of a toroid. So time I figure is 1-dimensional, because if time was 4th dimensional, it would have no effect on us. We would have no concept of time if we were 3-dimensional. In my theory, I say that we are 5-dimensional, And so in that case, you might consider, well, if time is four-dimensional and life is fifth-dimensional, then perhaps time comes before us. That's a reasonable argument. However, time does not behave in a fourth-dimensional way. Time only behaves in one dimension. It has a start and it has an end, which may also be linked at some point, but it's completely one-dimensional. The way it affects us here in the fifth dimension, it doesn't affect us in 4 dimensions here in the fifth dimension. It affects us in 1 dimension. We get born, we go forward through life, and then we die. And that is the timeline. If you want to measure events in history, we use a timeline. If you want to understand time from the very beginning at the Big Bang, we use a timeline. There is no other way of us measuring time except for by a line. My second point to how time is one-dimensional is through examining how light behaves. One of the properties of light is that it travels incredibly fast. We use the Latin term celeriat, I believe. So that's what C stands for in E equals mc squared. C squared is celeriat squared. It is the speed of light squared. Celeriat itself, C itself, is based on 2 dimensions. Speed is based on 2 dimensions. What are those dimensions? They are distance and time, or space and time. The space something can travel from this space to the next space, or from 2 points within space, and the time it takes to do that. So if we examine, you could Google a diagram of a photon, and you will find that those diagrams will confirm that a photon contains 0 mass. And a photon does not have 3 axes. A photon only has 2 axes. It can act like it's 3D. And so, in empty space, light can move in 3 dimensions. But the photon itself is only 2 dimensions, and it goes from point A to point B. But it goes from point A to point B. Point B is infinite. Space is all around it, like trying to slice up a cake and cut it in half and cut it in half and cut it in half and cut it in half, and with a sharp enough knife one could cut in half forever and find that there's infinite slices of cake, just like there's infinite points all around us. And light emits out from one point to the other, behaving in 3 dimensions but acting from 2. So back to celeriat, the speed of light. So speed is based on distance travelled and time it takes to get there. The photon travels a distance and it takes time to get there. A photon would not be able to move if there was no space to move in. And it would have no speed if there was no time to do it in. Are you with me? Therefore, space and time have to exist before a photon has any of its properties. photon can't have any speed if time doesn't exist. And it's the same principle as basically multiplying a line by pi. If that line is time, the timeline multiplied by pi, we see light moving out in many different directions from many different points, many different kinds of light from the many different numbers that exist within the timeline. I feel like I've got more to say on this. I feel like I'm stumbling and forgetting a critical point. But I think really the logic behind what I'm saying is there. Yeah. So time is one-dimensional. The dimensions of time and space being 0 dimensions, gives light its properties, gives the second dimension its behavior. Without the 0 and first dimension of space and time, light photons would not be able to do anything because there'd be no space and no time, and therefore there'd be no speed of light. So yeah, that's time in my theory. I'll probably try to talk a little bit about time travel later, but right now I don't think it's appropriate for me to go into that just yet, until I've explained each of my definitions of the 5 dimensions that we live in. Thank you for watching. Got this strange cuts on my face. I was playing with my dog, and that's what happens when you play with dogs. If you put your face in their face when they're all la la la. Anyway, thank you for listening. I hope this helps your understanding of my theory. I'm really enjoying doing this. Probably going to start trying to shave and clear up my appearance a bit. Not something I've paid too much attention to, but probably time I should. Okay, thank you very much.